Good afternoon. Welcome to Cool Springs. Today is Wednesday, December the 10th, 2025. And this is our series on the Gospel of Matthew. We spent the last 3 weeks dealing with just Matthew chapter 24, because in Matthew chapter 24, his disciples have asked Jesus 3 questions about the end times, the sign of his coming, and of the end of the age, and he's been answering those questions. And now in chapter 25, where we're going to be today, just in chapter 25, he's actually continuing that conversation. He has answered those 3 questions, but he's now filling in with some more details for them, and he's telling them parables to help them understand what it's going to be like in the end times. And the context of it is, it's the week he's going to go to the cross. He's ridden into town on the donkey, right behind the Passover lamb that was going to be sacrificed at the altar for the nation, and each family will have their own Passover lamb that they consume at home, just like we are now in the month of December. So just less than 2 weeks ago, we were celebrating the American holiday of Thanksgiving, where, yes, there was a national pardon of 2 turkeys by the president, where those 2 turkeys are allowed to live out their lives on some turkey farm. But virtually every household in America had a holiday meal where turkey was served as an individual thing. Well, Passover, they would celebrate in the Jewish religion as remembering what God did for them when he brought them out of Egypt. So each family had to have their own Passover lamb. Jesus has ridden into town for that feast. He's ridden into town right behind the national lamb. That's why the crowd was there, cheering and waving their palm branches. They were watching the priest do like the priest did every year to bring in the national lamb. Then they see Jesus riding in on the donkey right behind that lamb. And some of them, because they paid careful attention to what Gabriel revealed to Daniel in the book of Daniel, chapters 9 through 12, where Gabriel's telling Daniel what's going to happen to your people, your Jewish people in the future. And the prophecy that Gabriel gave about when Messiah would come and be cut off. And they've also read the prophecy of Zechariah, who lived about 500 years before Jesus, saying that they would be able to recognize their Messiah, that he would come into town, meek and lowly, riding on a donkey, on the colt of a young donkey. And now they're seeing it come true right before their eyes. And some of the people in the crowd, the majority of them, connected the dots. And so they started cheering for Jesus, the exact same phrase that they were cheering for the lamb that has just gone by. They understood that they were cheering for Jesus as the promised Messiah. The religious leaders understood that that's what the people were doing, and they weren't happy about it at all. So the religious leaders, instead of criticizing the people and stirring up a mob scene, they tried to use their position and authority as priests to tell Jesus, make your followers behave. Tell this rabble to keep quiet. And Jesus, recognizing the truth of the situation, said, no, this is what I came for. If these people don't cry out, the very stones themselves will cry out. He's proclaiming himself to be Messiah. And the religious leaders still don't want to hear it because they've hardened their hearts. Well, Jesus is going into Jerusalem every single day during that Passover week. He's going to the temple. He's right there where anybody can walk up to him and they can ask him questions and hear his answers. In other words, he's being inspected. Just like that lamb is tied up at the temple, and anybody that wants to can come and inspect the lamb to see if they find a blemish that would disqualify it as being the Passover lamb. And at night, he's leaving the temple and he's going back across the Kidron Valley to somewhere on the Mount of Olives. Some nights, Gethsemane, possibly, we don't really know every single night, possibly some nights going to the backside of the Mount of Olives to Lazarus and Mary and Martha's home, but he's right nearby. And he's going in every day, and he's proclaiming the good news, and he's answering questions. And now it's that night when they have asked those three questions. What's the sign? When will these things be? He's just talked to them about the temple going down. What's the sign of your coming and the end of the age? And he's answered that, and he can tell that they need a little bit more information. And that's where we pick up in chapter 25, where he is discussing the parable of the talents. And so we're going to read and comment as we go here. Then, that's a time reference. He's connecting what he's just said at the end of chapter 24, where he's just answered their questions to what he's now about to say. Then the kingdom of heaven will be comparable to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were prudent. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the prudent took oil in flasks along with their lamps. Now while the bridegroom was delaying, they all got drowsy and began to sleep. But at midnight, that's a time reference, at midnight, there was a shout, "Behold the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the prudent, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the prudent answered, "No, there won't be enough for us and you too. Instead, go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves." And while they were going away to make the purchase, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. Later, the other virgins also came, saying, "Lord, Lord, open up for us." But he answered, "Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Be on the alert then, for you do not know the day or the hour." That's the first parable he's going to tell his disciples. Remember, his disciples are Jewish. They are extremely familiar with Jewish wedding customs. Once a marriage contract had been agreed upon, and the groom had poured a cup of wine and set it before the bride along with a copy of the ketubah, the wedding contract, and the bride had read it over, she had a choice to make. She could choose to sip from the cup, in which case that sealed the covenant relationship, or she could reject it. Nobody could force her. It was entirely her choice. The grooms worked out the deal with the bride's family, specifically with her father, but the bride has the final say. She can say yes and agree to the marriage contract, or she can push the cup aside and say no, in which case the groom is leaving and he's not coming back. Once she has taken that cup and taken a sip from it, the groom tells her that he's going to prepare a place for her and that he'll come back and receive her to himself. He leaves, and the bride's job at that point is to be ready. She doesn't know when the groom is coming for her. Groom doesn't know either, because he's got to go back to where his father lives. You see, in a marriage, the bride was going to go and join her husband's family and be a part of that family unit forever. And so her task is to be ready. And in this parable, Jesus is talking about she's selected some friends to be part of her wedding party. And their job is to wait and support the bride and be ready to go at a moment's notice whenever the groom comes for her. The groom has gone back to his father's house, and he's either going to build a bridal chamber right there onto his father's house or in the compound nearby. And to protect the bride from being carried back to something that's put together hastily without thought, the groom has to work on the bridal chamber, and the father has to inspect his son's work. And only the father can tell his son, you have completed a proper place to bring back your bride, to consummate the marriage, to produce the grandchildren that are going to be part of my family forever. Now you could go and claim your bride. That's why when Jesus was asked questions about when he was going to return, he's going to use this custom that everybody in his audience is very familiar with. They know that the groom doesn't know when he's coming back either. He's busily preparing a chamber, a household, and when his father says it's ready, he can come and claim his bride. And normally, he's going to come in the middle of the night, and he's going to make a lot of noise, and the bride and her family and her friends have to be ready to go at a moment's notice to go into that wedding celebration. What's going to happen is the bride and groom and their family are going to go back to the groom's father's house. And there'll be a party that will last for a week until the couple reemerges in public as husband and wife. In order to go to that feast, those attendants need to have their oil lamps filled with oil. They need to have properly trimmed wicks, and they need to have extra oil that'll get them through all the different days of the wedding feast. So in this parable, Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he's telling them that there were these 10 virgins, these friends of the bride. They're supposed to be ready to celebrate with her when the time comes. And that 5 of them, half of them, are wise, they're prudent, they've done what they're supposed to do. They've made sure that they have an oil lamp, that it has oil in it, that it has a wick, that they have a means to light the fire, but that they also have additional oil so that they can pour it for the length of the party. Oh, but the other 5, they had their lamps, and maybe they had some oil in it, but not anywhere near enough. And so they hadn't planned for the future. And all of a sudden, when it's the middle of the night, and they think they've got more time, that time hasn't run out yet, all of a sudden they hear the noise of the bridal party coming, and what they want to do is rely on somebody else's work. If I'm one of the foolish virgins, I'm turning to my girlfriend who was wise and smart. Oops, I've been caught flat-footed here. Let me have some of your oil. You can't borrow somebody else's oil. You can't rely on somebody else's faith to get you into heaven. A lot of people in our day and time try to make that mistake of, well, of course I'm a Christian. My parents or my grandparents were Christian. No, God doesn't have any grandchildren. He has children. The 5 wise virgins told the other 5, there's not enough for me and you. You got to go out to the marketplace. In other words, you should have been prepared. Go see if you can buy oil. But of course, by the time they have found somebody to sell them the oil, and they've shown up at the groom's house, the door is already closed. Now, remember, the context of this is Jesus talking to his disciples who've been raised in the faith, and they know all of their history. One of the things that they know of is the story of Noah, and how Noah proclaimed the truth for 100 years while he's building that ark, and how when the ark was ready, God sent the animals in pairs to Noah, and they all entered the ark, and Noah and his family entered the ark, and that the door stayed open for a full week, for 7 days. And at the end of the 7 days, no one else seized the opportunity to go into the ark with Noah and his family. They had prepared for the day when God had promised them that judgment was going to come on the earth. Noah and his family had enough food on that ark for themselves and the animals to last for the length of the flood and beyond. They had seed to be able to replenish the earth once the flood waters had receded and all the plant life was gone, that they could replant the earth. They had provisions for the journey that they didn't know when the journey was going to begin. These disciples know that story. They know that judgment is going to come. Jesus has just answered their questions about what's the sign of your coming. They know he's going to depart, but they don't know when. They know that temple's going to go down because he's told them so. He's given them a lot of information, and he's adding to it with this parable about the 10 virgins. That they need to be ready for the unannounced time when the Lord returns. They understood why the bridal party members who were outside pounding on the door would no longer be let in. The party's underway. You had your opportunity. You missed it. The door's been closed. The people who experienced that flood, for the first time ever, when the fountains of the deep started to open up and rain fell for the first time ever on planet Earth, may have gone running to the ark at that point, and they were pounding on the door. But by then it was too late. Noah and his sons couldn't open the doors. They're not the ones who shut it. God himself sealed them in to protect them. He waited 7 days. Nobody else came. And God himself closed the door to the ark. It was sealed shut. The waters are already coming. They can't open it anymore. The disciples understand this part of it. And to make sure that they get the point, before he says anything else to them and starts to teach them any other meanings, he's going to give them a second parable, which is what we see here, starting in verse 14. The first 13 verses was the parable of the 10 virgins, some of whom were watching and waiting. That's what they were supposed to do. They know the bridegroom is going to come sometime. So just be ready for whenever it is. Set that oil aside. Have it at the ready. Have it always at your side, so that whenever you hear the sound of the bridegroom coming, you're ready. You're not caught unprepared. You're not flat-footed. The other 5, though, they procrastinated. They put it off. They thought they'd have more time. Oh, well, maybe he's not coming now. Maybe it'll be a long time from now. Why should I go out and spend the money now just to wait? Spiritually, they're like people who keep putting off making a decision for God. Oh, I'll wait till I'm older, or maybe right before I die, I'll finally give my life to God. But for right now, I'm going to do things my way. They're like those 5 foolish virgins. Verse 14, for it's just like a man about to go on a journey, who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, talent being a measure of money. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, each according to his own ability, and he went on his journey. The master gives one person 5 talents of money. Another one gets 2, another one gets 1. If they're looking around at each other, it's possible that the guy with 2 and the guy with 1 are looking at the guy with 5, and maybe they're jealous. Why him? Why did he get so much? How come my master didn't give me the same amount as he gave somebody else? You see, a lot of things can happen to you in life that you can't decide for yourselves. Other people make decisions that affect you. Other people make choices that do things to you. All you can choose is how you're going to respond. In the case of this parable, remember it's following immediately after the parable of the virgins. He's connecting these 2 stories so that his disciples will understand the importance of always being ready and always being faithful with what God is giving you. It's said there in verse 14 that the master called his own slaves, people who work for him, and entrusted his possessions to them. Whose possessions are they? The guy with 5 talents doesn't own the 5 talents. His master does. His master's entrusted him to do right with it. The guy that has the 2 talents, it's not his talents. It's his master's money. His master's trusted him with that amount. The guy with 1, still not yours. It belongs to your master. He's just trusting you to do the right thing with it. And verse 15 tells us that when he gave the 5 talents, 2 and the 1, each according to his own ability. Who made that judgment? The master. The master can choose to give one person 5, one person 2, and one person 1. Remember, they've already heard Jesus teaching to the crowds about the laborers, that a guy owned a vineyard and went out at the beginning of the day and hired a bunch of people to work in his fields and offered them a price, a denarius. If you'll work in the fields for me for the day. And they agree to it and they go. And then about noontime, the field owner realizes, I need more workers. So he goes again to the marketplace and looks for people who are looking for work. Go into my fields and I'll pay you what's right, and they're agreed, and they go. He realizes toward the end of the day, I still need more workers, and so he goes and he hires a few more people. I'll pay you what's right, and they go. And now the work day's over with, and everybody's lining up for payday. And he calls the group that came last, the people who'd only worked for an hour, and he gives them a full denarius. And so the ones who've been out there all day are thinking, well, if they got a denarius, we're going to get a whole lot more. But they get the same thing that the people who only worked an hour, the people who only worked half a day get, and they start to grumble when it's their turn to get paid. And Jesus has to remind them, what was the agreement? You said you'd work for me for the day, for a denarius. I haven't wronged you. It was my money. If I've chosen to be generous to these ones who came at the very last hour and these ones who've only been here for part of the time, it's my money. I can do what I want with it. The disciples have that in the back of their heads because they've already heard that teaching when Jesus is telling them this one. He went on his journey. Verse 16. Immediately, the master's away. Now what are the servants going to do? Immediately, the one who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and gained 5 more talents. He's just doubled his master's money. In the same manner, the one who had received the 2 talents gained 2 more. But he who received the 1 talent went away, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, there's that time reference there. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The master's just left, and immediately they all took action. The guy with the 5 and the guy with the 2 immediately went to work to see about doubling their master's money. And they did so. Even if they'd failed, at least they would have tried. The third guy, though, Mr. 1 talent, immediately goes, digs a hole, and buries it. But the master's been gone for a long time. At any point during the time that the master was gone, what could Mr. 1 talent have done? He could have looked at the example of what the guy with 5 and what the guy with 2 had done. Or, as he's later going to be told by his master, you could have at least put it in the bank and earned a little bit of interest. But what did you do? You hid it in the ground. And at no point did he ever go back to even try to do anything for his master. Now the master is coming back, and he's ready to settle accounts. Now after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The one who had received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you entrusted 5 talents to me. See, I have caused 5 more talents to come. It would have been all right if he'd had 6, 7, 8. He's doubled his money, but that's not really the important point. The important point is he was about the master's business. The master had entrusted him with his money to make a profit, to gain more wealth, and the servant had tried and he had succeeded. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. He's just been praised and rewarded, and he's been promised more rewards. Why? Because he did what the master wanted him to do. Also the one who had received the 2 talents came up and said, Master, you entrusted 2 talents to me. See, I've gained 2 more talents. Second verse, same as the first. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. You see, they both got the same reward. They're both told that they had done well. They're both called good and faithful. And they're both promised to be in their master's joy. And the one who had received the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you didn't sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. And I was afraid, and went away and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours. Has he judged his master correctly? No. He started out by insulting the boss. I knew you were a hard man, reaping where you didn't sow and gathering where you had not planted. From what we know of this story, that's not matching the man's character. He knew his servants well enough to go, this guy I'm going to entrust with 5, this guy with 2, this guy with 1. When the 2 who have done well, who have tried, who have done what the master asked them to do, presented, here's what we've done, sir. Your money's been doubled. He's welcomed both equally. He's received both equally. And now here's servant number 3 accusing the boss. Remember who's in this audience. There are faithful disciples there, but Judas is there too. Judas hasn't been revealed yet for who and what he is. Verse 25, that servant says, I was afraid. Really? Afraid of a master who's trusted you? Who's given you opportunities? Who's come back to find that you haven't done anything positive at all? And that you're blaming the master himself? You see, lost people do that. People who are eat up with sin, and people who haven't put their faith and trust in God yet. When life rears up and bites them, they'll have a tendency to blame everybody and everything except looking in the mirror and seeing what maybe is my role in this. This servant isn't seeing any responsibility for himself. I didn't do it because I was afraid of you. You trusted me, and I was afraid of you because I think you're a hard, cruel man. See, you have what's yours. Verse 26, but his master answered and said to him, you wicked, lazy slave. The other two both heard the same thing. Well done, good and faithful. This guy hears not only that he's wicked, because he's failed to do anything right, but that he's lazy because he didn't even try. He took no responsibility whatsoever. He just hid it and went about his business. You wicked, lazy slave. You knew that I reap where I did not sow and gather whether I had scattered no seed. Then you ought to have put my money in the bank, and on my arrival I would have received my money back with interest. Therefore, take away from him, take that talent away from him, and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. Take it away from Mr. Untrustworthy, Mr. I'll blame the world except myself, and give it to the guy I know I can trust. For to everyone who has, more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. You and I, like everybody who's ever lived, like Judas, have had the opportunity to recognize Jesus for who he is, to give ourselves to him, to trust what he can do in our lives. Or we can be like the guy in this parable, Mr. One Talent, who becomes not only Mr. No Talent, but is called exactly what he is: wicked, lazy. You had in your grasp the opportunity for salvation, and you threw it away. And so what you have, an opportunity to be part of God's family, to be received into the presence of your master, to be rewarded for being a well-acting, good, faithful servant, that's been taken away from you. Why? Because you made the wrong choice. Verse 30, throw out the worthless slave into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. He's not going to be received into the kingdom. He's not going to get to be part of God's household and family. He's cast into the outer darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. And who is Jesus talking to? The 12 disciples who've been with him, who've received opportunities from Jesus. He sent them out on missions to proclaim the gospel. He sent them out with the ability to heal people of different diseases, to proclaim the coming of the Lord. And 11 of the 12, sometimes they'll succeed, sometimes they'll fail, but they tried. And they get received into the kingdom. And you and I, if we're believers, we need to be about the business of trying to bring other people into the kingdom too. And whether we're successful or whether we fail, we tried. We don't need to be like Judas, who was there, who had every opportunity, and who ultimately never gave himself to God. Verse 31, but when the Son of Man comes in his glory, remember he's told these parables, first about the virgins, then about the talents, to his disciples, because he's still answering their questions from chapter 24 about what things are going to be like in the end times. But when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, Then he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations, you might want to underline that, all the nations, plural, will be gathered before him, and he will separate them from one another as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he, this master, the Son of Man, Jesus, who's going to be returning, and he will put the sheep on his right and the goats on the left. Then, that's a time reference, when the Son of Man returns, the whole world's going to see it. The whole world will know it. And Jesus will know who's really mine and who's not mine. He's going to separate those sheep from the goats. And he will say to those on the right, the sheep, "Come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you," and here's a time reference, "from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." He's listing all the different ways that people in this day were familiar with on how they ministered to other people's needs. Verse 37, "Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you thirsty and hungry and give you something to drink? And when did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?'" The king, Jesus is talking about himself, the king will answer and say to them, "Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it to me." Then he will also say to those on his left, "Depart from me, accursed ones, into the eternal fire which has been prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty. You gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger. You did not invite me in. Naked. You did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." Then they themselves will also answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not take care of you?" Then he will answer them, "Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. These will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life." That last section of Matthew chapter 25 there, starting really in verse 34 and going through the end of the chapter, is one of the passages that's been taken way out of context down through the years. There are some people who will try to preach a social gospel, and they'll focus on the fact that people are hungry and needy, and maybe they're in prison or they're refugees, and they'll say, "See, we've got to do this," but they'll neglect to share the gospel. They won't proclaim who Jesus is. And they think they're doing a good thing, and they think they're presenting the gospel, but it's a Jesusless gospel, where, oh, well, we should be taking care of the poor just because they're poor. We should be taking care of those who are naked, who don't have any worldly possessions. We should be doing all these things because, you see, that led them into thinking that the Robin Hood version of things. Take from the rich and give to the poor. The problem is, you're not giving what you have. You're taking something that belonged to somebody else and clothing yourself with this moral superiority of, well, the poor need it and the rich don't. The rich have to pay their fair share. You see how it's been twisted. And Jesus was talking to people who needed to know that they needed to proclaim the gospel first and foremost to a lost and dying world. His disciples are going to have the ability to go out and to heal people of diseases. After Jesus ascends back to heaven, we see people like Peter and John healing people. We see even the Apostle Paul, who comes along later, having the ability to heal people. But their mission is not go out and meet people's physical needs, and certainly not by robbing somebody else. Give them what you have, because it's yours and you can do what you want with it. But the main thing you need to give them is the gospel. And on the other end of the spectrum, you've got people who will tell folks who are in need, because Paul is going to write about that, well, be warm, but they don't have a cloak to wrap themselves in at night. They don't have a roof over their heads. They can't hear the gospel that's not being taught to them. They need to hear the gospel message. Jesus' disciples are the ones who are hearing these, because he's finishing answering their questions about what it's going to be like in those end times. He's letting them know there's a judgment day coming, and that the people who are proclaiming the gospel, who are going out there doing the work of ministry, seeing needs and meeting them in Jesus' name, they're going to be rewarded. Oh, but there are some people who think they're doing the right thing, who are going to wake up on Judgment Day when they're on the wrong side of Jesus and they're receiving the sentence, "Depart from me, ye cursed, I never knew you." They're going to realize at the last possible moment, oops, we've never given ourselves to God. And even then, they won't give themselves to God. There are going to be many, many people who will choose the second death. You and I have the responsibility as Christians of knowing God's Word, of doing our best in our faulty human bodies, to live for Christ, to let other people see Jesus in us, to proclaim the gospel. But we're not responsible for whether or not somebody else receives that gospel or not. They make their choices. Next week, the last 3 chapters of Matthew, 26, 27, and 28. Next week, we're going to largely deal with just 26 and 27. Because remember, this is taking place at the point in time where it is Passover week, where human history is about to come to its culmination, because Jesus is going into the temple courts every day. He's teaching. He's proclaiming God's Word. He's going out to the Mount of Olives at night. And on Thursday night, after he's celebrated the Passover in the upper room, after he's let his disciples know that the hour has come that one of them is going to betray him, and Judas leaves the room and they still don't know that it's Judas, they're going to go to the garden, and he's going to ask them to watch and pray with him. And even though he is in such agony of spirit that Luke will record Jesus is sweating drops of blood because he's under such stress, his closest friends will still fall asleep on him. And he'll have to wake them up not once but twice. And he'll protect them, even in the garden. When that arresting party's there, Jesus will say, "If I'm the one you're looking for, then you let these go." He's going to go to that cross. He's going to be the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Everything that he's been telling them all this time, from the Galilee area all the way down to Jerusalem, that he's got to go into Jerusalem, that he's got to suffer and die, because that's the only way they can be right with God. They're all going to hear it. And at least one of them, Judas, will let it go in one ear and straight out the other. He'll hear, but he won't believe. When we get to Matthew 28, the disciples are going to hear that the tomb is empty. Peter and John are going to go check it out. Matthew's not going to go check it out. Simon the Zealot's not going to go check it out. Thomas is not going to go check it out. They're going to hear from others that the tomb is empty. But then they're going to see the risen Lord. And for 40 more days, he's going to appear to them before he ascends back to heaven. And Luke is going to record for us that 40 days after his resurrection, Jesus will carry those 11 faithful disciples right back to the Mount of Olives, right where they are when they've been getting this teaching and the teaching that was in chapter 24. And he's going to tell them, you wait here in Jerusalem until I send the Holy Spirit. And when I send the Holy Spirit, then you're going to be my witnesses. He's given them talents. You're going to be my witnesses. First in Jerusalem, where they'll be around other people like them. Then Judea, more people like them. Then Samaria, people who are part Jewish, part not. Then to the utmost parts of the earth. They're going to be spreading the gospel. They're going to have to be faithful servants. They won't always encounter worldly success. They're going to be persecuted. They're going to die martyrs' deaths. But they're going to stay faithful to the mission. And what Jesus just told them in chapter 25 is, when Judgment Day comes, you're going to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. You're going to receive my reward. You're going to be part of my family forever. That offer is to the 11 faithful disciples, but it's also to you and me. We put our faith and trust in Christ. Your task is to be a good and faithful servant, a wise virgin, not the one who wasn't prepared, not the one who misjudged who the master is, who decided, I don't like God the way he's presented in the Bible. I'm going to create my own God. No, you can't do that. You're not God. You can't make God. Are you going to put your faith and trust in him? Are you going to hear, good and faithful servant, well done? Or are you going to face that judgment to come? The choice is up to you. Next week, chapters 26 and 27. Thanks for watching.